Are you a young Christian trying to find love in today's society? Well, before you go straying your new fine tuxedo on the streets trying to find love, you might want to listen to these tips. Everyone knows that the one way to have an unhealthy relationship is if you've slept with another person. This lady in the video right here just told her mother that she jacked off 20 guys before getting married. No wonder her relationship is in shambles. Men don't want damaged goods. God tells us not to have sex until we're married. This young lady is telling her husband about how she once had sex with an atheist. Clearly he's not impressed. The only way to solve this issue is if you do what God asks you to do and not have sex until you're married. And don't you dare think about getting a divorce. This advertisement has been brought to you by Folgers Coffee, the most sexist of coffees. I'm really glad this mentality died out in the 60s. I wonder what else is on TV.
Also, Kristen and I, we just wrote this book, Sex, Purity, and the Longings of a Girl's Heart, Discovering the Beauty and Freedom of God-Defined Sexuality. And I think your story really does offer that beauty and that freedom.
I really need a new TV. Before we get into today's video, I want to say that the aspect ratio the video I'm responding to was uploaded in is so fucking terrible that I actually had to sharpen it slightly just so that it wouldn't look grainy. That's why it looks a little weird and color corrected. I honestly have no idea how they could have fucked up this bad, but clearly they didn't know how to stack two videos on top of each other, so instead they put them side by side for some god-awful reason. If you can explain to me in the comments down below why Girl Defined is so technologically inept, I would love to hear the explanation as to why these dumbasses thought it was a good idea to put two landscape videos side by side rather than stacking them vertical, thus making the aspect ratio more squared. I don't get it. I don't fucking understand. I digress. Today we're talking about Paul and Morgan and Girl Defined. It's a 2-for-1 special on idiots, or rather 4-for-1, I guess, but I kind of consider Girl Defined to be one entity sharing a brain. Paul and Morgan are only slightly more independently sentient, and who would have guessed that they'd be talking about God-defined sexuality and why you shouldn't sleep with people before you're married to them. Without further ado, let's just jump right into the news.
Hey guys, it is Kristen and Bethany and Paul and Morgan. We're so excited. We are so excited to get to chat with them today. But if you guys like this video, give us a thumbs up. If you want to see more from us, we post new videos on a regular basis. And if you want to support our channel, please come on over to patreon.com, click the link below to support this channel and keep it going.
Girl Defined are by no means the only YouTubers that do this, but I find it incredibly irritating when at the beginning of a video you ask people to like and subscribe and go to your Patreon. Usually you only see this tactic being used by people who are catering to a really young audience, like that one 3 a.m. challenge dude. I think his name is something like J Station. And I think it's very telling on how you view your audience's intellect and attention span if you have to beg them to like and subscribe. If your video is good, people will like it. If people want to see more of your content, they're going to subscribe. You asking them to like and subscribe doesn't do anything unless you're talking to people who don't know what the fuck the internet is. But it's especially annoying to see this at the beginning of your video because you're advertising to people who have never watched your content before, and they still haven't even seen your content. They've just heard you ask them to give you praise. The only thing people have to go by on if they like your content or not thus far is the fact that the editing looks like dog shit, and you guys sound incredibly annoying. So, instantaneously, first impressions, I don't want to like and subscribe, and I certainly don't want to give you my money, you fucking idiot. I'm skipping ahead because what comes next is a bunch of introductions.
So for people who don't know your story and kind of your background, can you just kind of share with us a little bit about your journey before you met Paul?
Yeah, so before I met Paul, I was in a 3.5-year long relationship with a guy who was not really walking with the Lord. I knew God. My heart was for him, but I just kind of went down the wrong path and continued to stray down that path with this guy.
There are a few things that I want to talk about on this now. The first being that she says she knows God. You can't know something unless it's factually evident. Meaning you can't know something unless there is evidence for its existence. You might believe in God, you might have faith in God, but you don't know God. You might even think you know God, but until you could prove God's existence, you don't know God. I believe in a cyclical universe, but I can't prove that, and there's no evidence for that. Ergo, I don't know that this is a cyclical universe. I just believe there is. Secondly, if you can't have a disagreement in beliefs with someone and be able to have a relationship with them, that shows how indoctrinated and dogmatic your religion is. It can be your preference not to date someone who is not of the same faith as you or has no faith whatsoever. But if you feel threatened by your partner's belief or lack of belief, it shows a lack of confidence in your own beliefs. She also said she started going down the wrong path according to God. Now, let's assume God is real. If he is real, how do you know you are disobeying him by doing whatever it was you were doing? Which, for all we know, you could have been doing whippets and flashing your tits to people. Who fucking knows? Because you don't fucking elaborate. How do we not know that God made us susceptible to getting high from compressed air because we're supposed to do whippets? But I guess you know God exists and you know what he hates because of some Bronze Age book that was written by people who say they spoke to God, which was then mistranslated by and revised by people who said they were influenced by God. Never mind that the Bible is supposed to be the inerrant word of God that is infallible and unable to be misinterpreted. You know that God exists, and you know it's your God, and you know that your God hates these things. I went on a tangent here. Let's continue with the video.
And I lost my virginity to him, and it was just a battle of me feeling completely hopeless, worthless, terrible, guilty, just all of the bad things I felt about myself.
If you were abused in your relationship, I have the utmost of sympathy for you. I don't know if she's talking about abuse, but it sounds like she is. I haven't actually watched her testimony video that this is all based on. But just because I have compassion for the fact that you may have been abused doesn't mean I'm not going to tear your video to shreds. Also, check out Paul's face when she said she lost her virginity to her ex.
It's a crying shame. It's a royal pain.
Fucking hilarious. And even though it's obvious, I should mention that having sex out of wedlock doesn't lead to an abusive relationship. Having an abusive partner leads to having an abusive relationship.
And when I first met Paul, on our first date, he was just kind of telling me, and it was very clear, he didn't even have to tell me, it was very clear that he was pure, he was saving himself for his wife, and I just immediately was like, this guy is not going to want anything to do with me.
If a guy doesn't want to be in a relationship with you because you're not pure, that's fucking bullshit, and you should run, because he's most likely an ape-minded psychopath. The mentality of virginity actually stems from the fact that we are all descended from apes. For males in particular, it's so that your gene pool passes on and other males don't. A good comparison is that a lot of mammals do something called mate guarding. For example, the elephant seal will have one alpha male who has a harem of females and who will viciously murder any other rival seals. There's nothing special about virginity. Now, if it's your personal preference to quote-unquote stay pure or stay a virgin until marriage, you do you. I'm just saying it's a completely pointless notion. The only difference between having sex with a chick who is a virgin and having sex with a chick who is not a virgin is if you're having sex with a chick who's a virgin, there's going to be a lot more blood involved. I should mention that this is completely irrelevant to people in the GSRM community, but Paul and Morgan and Girl Defined don't recognize people in the GSRM community as people.
Like, I had repented, I had turned from that sin and, totally started over. But I just knew and felt like he just wasn't going to want anything to do with me. And that was not the case. Here we are, 3 years later.
I didn't bring this up before, and I really should have. Morgan is so indoctrinated into her dogma that she was afraid she would be unlovable because she had sex before marriage. And before she could even become lovable again, she had to repent before God. And even then, she was still afraid that Paul wouldn't love her. Fucking ridiculous.
Yeah. So what happened? Because I think a lot of girls, for any of us who've made past mistakes, and we're like, I've made this mistake. I don't think that God could ever forgive me. Or if God forgives me, I don't think an earthly guy who's following the Lord is ever going to be able to forgive me.
Again, treating like out of wedlock sex is a mistake. You know what's a mistake? Not having sex with someone until you're married to them and then realizing that the sex you have with them really sucks. Because then you have to sign a whole bunch of paperwork to get out of it. Or if you're in a religion that forbids you to actually get divorced, you're stuck with that person for the rest of your fucking life. People's relationships and past experiences are nobody's business except for their own. To cast judgment on someone for having sex before marriage, it's such an old world philosophy that I am shocked that it still exists today in people like Girl Defined and Paul and Morgan. And it goes to show yet again that Christianity is one of the major bastions that hold societal progression back. And the whole concept of sinning against God completely baffles me because I thought the only way you couldn't get into heaven is if you don't believe in Him. Why does it matter if you sin against God if the only way you can get into hell is by not believing in Him?
Ever going to be able to look past that and say, yes, there's forgiveness, there's redemption, there's restoration. This woman is whole in Christ. And so, Paul, how was that for you? I mean, really having that gospel lens to see Morgan from that perspective of redemption.
Yeah, absolutely. I think different men are going to have different levels of grace on. I do think it is a struggle for some men that perhaps have really been desiring purity. And then they start dating a woman and they hear that, it could be challenging for them. I will start out by saying, though, that every godly man needs to be able to forgive and needs to be able to say, oh my goodness, like God has wiped you white as snow if you've asked for forgiveness, and I will too.
How noble and graceful of you to forgive Morgan for having a sexual experience in her past relationship, which is a social norm in today's society. Really, such a stand-up guy. You wouldn't have to forgive her if it wasn't an issue, and it's not an issue to anyone except for you religious fanatics.
But it still can be challenging for men, and I have guys message me on Instagram saying, I've kept myself pure and now I'm dating this girl and she just told me that, she lost her virginity and that's really difficult for me. And my response is, forgive them, don't hold it against them, but that could be something that sticks with you and it's just really hard to get past.
Why though? Why is it an issue? In fact, I'd argue that it would be better to fuck someone who has had experience because they probably know a lot more fun and interesting positions than missionary.
And I don't mean to prolong that aspect because for me, Morgan shared that with me. She was very real, very open on our very first date. And she shared it with me. And I just had grace to be like, she isn't who she used to be. She's, asked God for forgiveness and she's in a different place. Like, come on, I forgive you. Your heart is for the Lord. I'm not going to look back.
I really hate how he's making it seem like he's so fucking noble for accepting this, God forbid, not virgin. Yeah, you're a real hero, dude. Keep patting yourself on the fucking back. Seriously, what kind of bullshit is this? And before anyone calls me a social justice warrior or any bullshit like that, if Paul was the one who had sex out of wedlock, I'd defend this just as hard, because the entire concept of mate guarding and virginity and bullshit like that is just so dated and stupid and pointless. I can actually show the statistics of how preaching abstinence before marriage actually leads to more frequent teen pregnancies, but seeing as that's not what this is about, I'm not even going to show that. But the entire idea of abstinence before marriage is incredibly ineffective. And people who belittle others for having sex out of wedlock are fucking deplorable. Libido is a naturally occurring human trait because evolution decided the more horny you are, the more likely you're going to pass down your genes. It just kind of makes sense.
So I want y'all to speak to something else though. So in our chapter on purity, we have 3 points that are about like lies we believe about purity. And one of them is that our worth is bound up in our purity. So the fact that like the more pure we are, the more worth we have in God's eyes, when obviously, you know, that's why Jesus died on the cross, because we're completely impure. So Morgan, how did you come to the place of actually really accepting God's grace and forgiveness like we all have to do, but for you personally with your situation, what did that process look like?
I like how they just admitted that abstinence before marriage is completely pointless. I mean, they just did my job for me, so that's all I got. Okay, so I just got off the phone with the leftist media who are controlling all my thoughts and emotions, and they said I'm not done here, so I guess we're carrying on. Before we go further into the video, I really want to know, how much purer can you get than being a virgin? Like, what is the scale of purity? Is at the very bottom, like, Meth House Mary? Then at the top, you have that one secretary that Bill Clinton didn't fuck? I really don't understand.
That's a good question. I feel like, you know, for those 3.5 years that I was in this toxic relationship, I did look at purity like, okay, the more pure I am and the purest I can be with this guy, like, I'm going to just like level up in my relationship with God.
I guess I'm really lost on the definition of purity. I would really like to know what their definition of purity is. Because the only definition of purity I know is how much contaminant there is in any one substance. But I like how they're treating their relationship with God like Pokemon. Like, I gotta really grind to level up my relationship with God. How do you gain EXP with God? I really need to know. Because right now I've been focusing on my Satan faction, and honestly I have 0 EXP in God, so I'm really struggling on this final boss. Fuck me dead, this is so fucking confusing. So however pure you are is however good God looks at you, but we're all impure because of original sin, which Jesus washed away, so there is no original sin, so we aren't impure. But even if we do impure things, we still go to heaven unless we don't believe in God. Is believing in God like the 5 pieces of Exodia? If you play all of them, you instantly win the match? If so, what's the point in not sinning? I really don't get it. This all seems vacuous and empty. And why would God even care if you're having sex out of wedlock? To an infinite, immortal, omnipotent being, it shouldn't matter to him whether or not we are fucking while on planet Earth. If God really wanted us to not have sex out of wedlock, why didn't he design us like he designed moray eels, and so our genitals would not grow in until it's mating season? Except in this case, they wouldn't grow in until you're married. Actually, a better question is, why is it that our closest extant relatives, the bonobos, use sex as a form of communication? Are you tired of a daily grind and having rhetoric spewed at you from every direction? Maybe you're being crushed by existential dread and depression. If this applies to you, please check out this wonderful design at teespring.com/stores/thedeadzone. There you can also find my logo in both black and white. They may be separate, but I can assure you they are equal price. Remember, that's teespring.com/stores/thedeadzone. For your convenience, we also put the link in the description down below. Seeing as we're at the 20-minute mark, I'm going to have to end today's episode here, and honestly it's for the best because the rest of their video is kind of boring. If you want me to cover the video that's on Paul and Morgan's channel of them collabing with Girl Defined, which is kind of the second part of this, please let me know in the comments down below. But other than that, my name's Unded Meowth. That's all I got.
What can I do? What can I say? Choose your weapon, time to